Let's get down to business. Impediments also come in the form of rebuttals. That's the way we always did things. Oh, we have to do it this way. We'll get in trouble if we don't. We don't know how to. Or my favorite, that's not Agile. The next time someone says that, pull out the Agile Manifesto, 4 values, 12 principles, and say, really, where does the Agile Manifesto say anything about every team doing story points? Doesn't. Okay, so that's not Agile, it's my favorite. Or it's an emergency. Well, everything's an emergency in some companies. Who works for a company like that? Yeah, okay, you don't have to raise your hands. This is being videoed evidently. I'm working for a company like that right now. There's no difference. Everything's important and everything's urgent. So what did I start doing to make that impediment visible? I started showing my burn down chart that looks something like this for the last 4 sprints. Nothing that was originally planned gets completed. So when management saw that, they started realizing, oh, we can't keep asking you for ad hoc requests and expect that everything you planned and committed to 2 weeks ago is actually going to get done. I said, bingo, limit my work in progress. Thank you very much. It's not that I'm lazy, it's just that the most important things are done faster. Okay, so everything can't be critical. I guess everything could be critical, but everything can't be urgent. And if it is, then maybe we should hire more people. So, okay, so a bad hunting joke, but sometimes impediments are right in front of our faces. Okay, and I have a very terribly designed slide here. I apologize for that, but it's to show a point. I typically will do anonymous surveys to get a sense of the kinds of impediments that people are running into. And this was a response to a survey from maybe 7 years ago. And this person, morale's low, I don't feel like my manager cares about what I have to say, time management is an oxymoron, we developers are told when a feature will be done regardless of our input, my manager doesn't value me as a person or my time, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? So the first thing to do is sort of validate that these are real circumstances and maybe not just one unhappy person. And in this case, this was a set of real circumstances. And basically, if we go through and identify all the impediments, there's quite a few here in one statement. So this runs the gamut of everywhere from management education on what Agile means in terms of teams pulling work and being empowered. This runs the gamut of fixing morale issues, probably talking with HR and figuring out how to go about that. This is a long-running impediment that could take years to fix. This is a big problem. The company was losing its key creative people because of the way, unfortunately, the leads were treating the people on the teams and supposedly doing Scrum, supposedly doing Agile, which was really interesting. So lots of coaching opportunity there. They ended up turning a corner, and 2 years later, ended up using the best process to meet their business needs. So for 10 months out of the year, 9 months out of the year, they used Scrum. And for the other 3 months of the year, they used Kanban. 3 months out of the year, they did 80% of the company revenue during holiday season. It was a retail site. So they used Kanban to stay just in time. When the rest of the year things were slower, they used Scrum as a way to make incremental progress. So they ended up using the process, picking the best process to meet their business need, not vice versa. Not being a slave to the process, so to speak. So the company really turned a corner and then eventually sold the company and everybody made a lot of money, and that was, I guess, is that the point? I don't know, but happy ending for them. Okay. So what we want to do is find the impediments at all costs. And often organizations that have been dealing with those red stop signs and red impediments for too long, unfortunately encounter a state of what we call learned helplessness. And learned helplessness was coined in the 60s. There was an experiment done at the University of Pennsylvania by Dr. Seligman, I believe. And make a long story short, he put 2 dogs together. There was an electrical current on the floor that half the dogs would learn to respond to and get away from, and half the dogs couldn't. So when they put them in this experimental box, the dogs that had learned how to get away from the electrical current would jump over the partition to escape it. But the dogs that had learned that they couldn't escape it laid on the floor and whined. Okay, so organizations that are going through a really tough transition period, it's almost like the dogs lying on the floor and whining. They don't see a way out. Now maybe you guys don't have such a terrible existence with this, but I do run across it in many different cultures, many different countries, unfortunately. Or maybe it's the developer whose manager signed up for a fixed bid contract, and the developer feels like there's no way out of working 60 hours a week and can't spend time with their families or can't go to their son's birthday. And they give up. They say, well, there's nothing I can do about it. That's learned helplessness. Do you know how the researchers helped the dogs learn that they could cross the partition? What's that? What did you say, sorry? They actually didn't, but close to that. They didn't give them treats, and they didn't use negative stimulus. They didn't threaten them or treat them. They basically showed them, they picked the dog up, they moved its paws over the partition, and showed it how to jump over. And that's when the dog would jump. So when we think about coaching and getting a more agile organization, it isn't about treats and negative stimulus and punishment. It's about showing people a new way, showing them how to identify impediments, showing them how to remove them, and being very courageous in that effort. So you have to be able to do it, and it's hard. It's really tough to really go in front of an executive team and say, here's what I think the problem is. What do you guys think about this? Okay, but showing them the way. So I thought that was a really interesting experiment, and the way out, I think, is absolutely analogous to what we do as coaches. Who's a coach in the room? Any Agile coaches? Okay. How do you feel about that? Yeah? Okay. Show them the way out. All right. So what do we do about impediments? Any Game of Thrones fans? Okay, good. There's a choral. That's kind of weird. All right. We should talk. Okay. Hodor had one job, and he did it. And if you're not a Game of Thrones fan, you don't get it. But he had to hold the door. That's all he had to do. So Scrum Masters, you have to remove impediments. Run the process and remove impediments. You actually have two jobs. Okay. Anyway, who's counting? So basically, what we want to do is make impediments visible. First and foremost, even if you do nothing about them, just make them visible. Every week where I'm coaching, I have to do an executive level impediments list. And one of my executives 3 or 4 weeks ago put them on Post-it notes and put them on his office door. I was like, yes. So he's actually making it visible to his peers, and he's at least taking it seriously enough to write it on a Post-it note. I don't know. But he's actually really trying to help the teams out. Develop an escalation path. But first, empower the teams to remove as many obstacles as they can. It's all about empowerment. It's all about teams that are self-contained and able. So let's treat them as if they are. Okay, give them a chance. And some things they won't feel as if they're able to do, and some things maybe they can't. So as Scrum Masters, we take that on for the team. Product owners can absolutely take on impediments as well, especially when it's in terms of budget and time and being able to make trade-offs so that the team might have a better sustainable pace or what have you. Whoever reported the impediment says when it's satisfactorily resolved. So if it's your issue, you're going to be the one who knows if it's been resolved for you, if your life is better. So who's the product owner of an impediment? The person who reported the impediment. It's kind of an interesting thought. So all of a sudden now, we might get executives that respond back to their teams, actually do sprint demos of how they resolved impediments back to the team members. That's a fascinating thing to watch. Teams are eating popcorn. They're saying, yeah, user stories aren't so easy to write, are they, managers? Everybody gets a laugh, but stuff's getting done. All right, so we can run impediment reporting, and I'll share this with you guys. This isn't the most important part of the presentation, but I think this point is very important. Again, this comes from Mike Beadle. It is a enterprise Scrum business agility canvas, and the idea behind this was that you could take an item of value and see all of the corresponding parts that led toward value. So if we have to deliver a new marketing campaign and we have some legal review and some technology that has to be completed in order to do so, we could see all of that in one big place. And Mike called it all-at-once management. Okay, so that's a whole nother topic of presentation. But what's interesting about this is that teams create product units which create an organization. And an organization subsumes the impediments at the individual level. In other words, all of those impediments that we have as individuals add up. And they add up in ways that slow us down, that prevent feedback, that maybe lead to a worse quality than what we had hoped for. So now if we have people who are actively trying to resolve those impediments, our product flows better, our business can be more pivotable, if that's a word, and we can be more flexible within our industries. So organizational impediments are subsumed from the individual level. And I think this is an important concept for Scrum Masters, coaches, managers to get, that we can only be as agile as our longest feedback cycle. Okay. So we want to be able to recover quickly and move into a new set of actions. That's what I call fail agility, and that's the next topic. Okay, this was an exercise for the last presentation I gave. Sorry about that. Moving on, animation. Okay. So basically, you'll get the slides, and this is a way of breaking down and creating a personal map as to goals that you might have. So I like to train and ride dressage. Charlotte Dujardin is my idol, and if you don't know her, Google her, she's awesome. And these were all of my impediments keeping me from being a Grand Prix rider, not to mention money. It really requires all the time in the world. And these were some actions I could take to maybe resolve those impediments. And we can do this at the individual level. Obviously, we probably would do this in a work context, but absolutely you can apply this to life. And then, of course, within our organizations, we can do this across departments. So if I just get up earlier, I can get it all done. Evidently, that's the answer. Okay. But we can look at organizational maps and start to then look at, okay, well, if our people are impeded, what are the larger, more umbrella impediments that we might have? So I mapped out one. I won't read this whole thing to you, but people are not focused. Why might that be? So I went into 4 or 5 different whys. The vendor team members not focused, people feel they can't say no, etc. And I started unpacking it with the lean concept of the 5 whys. Nothing new here, it really works wonders. So people can't feel they say no because the perception is that busy is good. How many of you work in organizations where busy, busy, busy is good? Good, good, good. Okay. All right. So the busier you are, the better you look. Evidently. Who knew? Okay. I just need to stay busy all the time. Perception is busy is good. And why? Performance review rewards or punishes it. Punishes no. How many of you have ever been punished for no at your workplaces? Not as many hands here as in the States, or maybe some shy people, that's okay. But you know, we say no trying to set up a boundary and to do a better job for the stuff that is on our plates, and then we end up getting punished for it. Or maybe someone says we could be more accommodating, and it's phrased as a sideways compliment, okay? Performance review rewards or punishes no. Management, why? Management believes this works. So if we unpack it all the way, it's a belief system that comes from the 1800s. Frederick Winslow Taylor, who says that we should do time and motion studies, and the more we reward them or the more we punish them, like dogs, we can get the behavior we expect. Well, 1700s management practices don't work so well in the knowledge working space. Maybe for assembly line, and I would argue that, Toyota. So it's really interesting concept. So what happened when I started unpacking and asking 5 whys for each of these impediments and the initial reasons, I started to realize there was an impediment cluster, that the impediment of management belief and management training actually underrides a lot of this behavior of people not being focused. Well, when people aren't focused, they're multitasking, context switching. Studies say they're losing anywhere from 25 to 50%, 60% of their time, depending on the number of items they're multitasking against. So if I'm going to make a case to management, I might do a survey and say, on average, how many projects or initiatives are people on? Figure out what the correlating context switching cost loss is, and put some numbers to that. And say, look, this isn't perfect, but rough calculation, maybe we should think about fixing this. Knowledge work, people do the best job when they're focused, except for 2% of us. That means about 2 of us in this room, you don't have to reveal yourselves, actually improve with multitasking. Science shows it, only 2%. So this belief that the more we put the right expert on at the same time, the faster it's all going to get done, absolute fallacy. Unless you're those 2 people, and God love you, that must be nice. Okay, I get more than one thing on my plate and everything falls apart. So, and that's the way most of us work. So what we can think about when we unpack these impediments is what can be done at each step and who can help me. First of all, really, can the team handle it? In this case, they can't. It's an organizational and managerial mindset. So then the next question for the Scrum Master is, who can help me? How can I make the case? How can I put this in front of people? And then I might work with other Scrum Masters to identify patterns and maybe band together for potential solutions. Okay. All right, this is another exercise. A lot of people ask, can I use the story format to write impediments? Sure, why not? The story format is great. It gives us a who, a what, and a why. So I think if you can phrase it that way, it really helps in one sentence understand who's requesting the change, why they need it, and what they need. Okay, so as a developer, I need to explore some tools to help me improve developer testing, unit test-driven development, so that I'm committing less buggy code. Sounds like a pretty reasonable request. That's not necessarily an impediment, but an improvement. It is an impediment to speedier delivery and higher quality delivery. As a team member, I'd like a daily Scrum meeting to stick to 15 minutes so I can get back to work. That's fair. That's what the book says. Okay. In fact, the developers should be running the daily Scrum. So imagine if they ran it, it probably would be over in about 2.7 seconds. Okay. So looking at the story concept from Team Awesome, detected in Sprint 5, they maybe want to automate functional tests so they can decrease the time spent in manual testing. So this is a really nice improvement. It's an impediment in that they could, it's impeding additional functionality from being done every sprint. So if they make this improvement, it's an investment. The ultimate resolution from this team would be that all functional tests are automated. It would take about 6 sprints total. That way they would never have to do any more click testing. They really wanted to do it. A good first step they determined is that they could implement an automated test tool and automate tests for this sprint stories. So there's this concept of there's the ideal solution, and then what's one step that would move the needle toward a better situation? Because some impediments take a long time. Some impediments will never be fully resolved. So we'd love to have it our way, and maybe there's a way to negotiate a small step toward that ultimate resolution.